Hello, I'm Superintendent David Brown, and I'm here with a special segment of Real Talk. Here with me is Chief Equity Officer Candace Moore with the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. Hello, Candace.
Hi, thank
Great.
you for having me.
And also with me is Officer Malcolm Brooks with the Chicago Police Department from the 15th District, who, by the way, became a police officer with the Be the Change campaign in 2017. Hello, Malcolm.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me, Superintendent.
So my first question is to you, Malcolm. Discuss your perspective coming on first as a civilian and then as a police officer in 2017 under the Be the Change hiring campaign.
Okay, so I was born in the Gresham part of the city. Grew up over there, and so growing up, you know.
So that's Southside, right?
Southside. I'm a Southside.
So does that mean you're a Sox fan, or?
I'm a Sox fan.
That's what I thought.
All day. So I grew up over there, and growing up, to be honest, I didn't want to be the police growing up.
Yeah. But
what ended up happening was I attended a church with a guy who's on the job, and I was kind of like helping out with their security ministry, and he was like, "Man, you'll be a good police officer," and I was like, "I don't know about that," you know. So after a while, me and my cousin, who works in the 6th District, because he got on the job too, we decided to go take the test,
Right.
And we both passed the test and we got on the job. And so when we got on the job and I got into the academy, it went from a job to more of a calling in my mind. Things started to open up in my mind, and the whole Be the Change thing, it became like something that I really took personally and I took literally. Like, I wanted to be the person, you know, from my neighborhood that people can look at and say, you know what, he made it out and he's a representation of us, and, you know, he looks like us, but he treats people with compassion and things like that.
So what did your parents and other family members think about you being a police officer?
At first, I feel like they were probably a little nervous.
Yeah.
You know, given that the police is a dangerous job, it has dangerous components, but they actually were really supportive. And I was at the time of my life when I was looking for a career change, and so they were really supportive for the most part.
So let's fast forward as my last question to you.
Okay.
So it's 2020.
Okay.
And the video of George Floyd being killed happens.
Okay.
Now what do you think about this job, and what do you think your family and friends think about you doing this job?
Well, okay, so when that happened, it was a lot of frustration.
Right.
Being a black officer, being on the job, and having to like navigate with my family. But the thing is that people that know me personally, so they didn't. It was about the uniform. It wasn't about me personally, so I didn't take it personal. They were still really supportive. Of course, you would see things on social media that family members would put up, you know, about the police. But it was a time where you know, it was a little scary, you know,
Yes.
going through the riots and things
Right.
like that. But overall, like I said, the people around me were really supportive, and they were glad that I, you know, took the job. So.
Thanks, Malcolm. I appreciate your honesty, man.
Yeah.
So Candace, can you discuss with me and Malcolm and others in the audience the need to discuss and normalize the concepts of racial equity within our city, and specifically that same need to discuss within the Chicago Police Department?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I can tell a little bit of a story of how I got into this job that I think kind of illustrates it for me. So before I worked for the city, I had never worked for government before. I actually never thought I was going to work in government. I was a civil rights attorney, and so in fact, my job was to challenge government,
Right.
and I was sort of in the business of doing that. But when I did that, it was always about thinking about systems and the outcomes that they produce. Less about individual people, but overall, I represented, at that time, students. And, you know, we could talk all day long about who did what and why they did it, but at the end of the day, a young person was facing losing access to school.
Mm-hmm.
And so often, those young people were black. They were black and brown, they were boys, and that is a systems pattern, right? Individual decisions aside, when we tally it all up, these are a group of young people that are disproportionately impacted by this, which means that we got to do something about it. I or any individual may not be in charge of that of all the decisions, but collectively we have a responsibility. And so as a lawyer, my job was to push and to advocate and to highlight and try to identify clear strategies to change systems. But I think one of the things that kind of gnawed at me as a lawyer is that I was doing the cleanup work, or I was doing it after a bad thing happened. There were 1,000 little decisions that would happen beforehand that I wasn't a part of that conversation, or man, if people would have just thought about this different, had a more honest conversation about what would have happened, maybe we wouldn't be in a situation where we're trying to solve something for a young person after the harm has happened.
Right.
And so fast forward, and there's a whole story in there between, but I come to the mayor's office into this moment in which we as Chicago are saying we are ready to have real conversations about race, about racial inequity, about racial injustice, and we want to see something happen, which means we're going to make some changes in government. Now, I wasn't naive in thinking that a simple conversation was going to solve it, but I did believe that there's a way to start these things. And to your point, we have to normalize the conversation about race. It's around us. It impacts every single decision. It plays out in patterns and practices in all sorts of government services, certainly in policing, right? And so how are we going to have that conversation? It's a tough conversation. I mean, you just mentioned George Floyd. What could be tougher? But if we can't talk about it, and if we can't identify and have some real conversations about what are we going to do differently, then what chance do we have to make a difference? And so in this job, I really support departments all across the city and agencies in normalizing the conversation about race, organizing, meaning what are our resources, what are our data, what are our people that need to be in place to make change, and at the end of the day, operationalizing. What are we going to do with the opportunity that we have in front of us to do something different and have a different impact? And so, to me, the police department is certainly included in that. I'm always thinking about, okay, so what is this going to look like for us? We have this moment. What are we going to make of it?
One of the things that sometimes people conflate is equity with diversity and inclusion. They all say it like it's a run-on sentence, it's one thing, and you just described equity. Some of the best descriptions I've had about the difference between diversity and inclusion is diversity is inviting me to the dance. Inclusion is asking me to dance at the invitation. So how would you distinguish between equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Yeah, that's so important. Actually, that question was one of the most important ones when I started off this job. And so I actually did a training called Equity 101. And where we start is we give 4 words: diversity, inclusion, equality, and equity. And I joke sometimes that folks, sometimes folks say all 4 words together and hope that one of them is the right one and keep on moving. But words mean things.
Yes.
They're spelled different. They have different meanings.
That's right.
So what do these 4 words mean? And I'll give you guys kind of the quick version, but to your point, diversity is about different. Diversity is not just another way to say black or brown. Diversity is about difference. It could be differences based off of race, differences based off of gender, and difference in and of itself is not a bad thing.
That's right.
It's what we associate with difference, right? How we treat difference, and that gets into the question of inclusion. What am I going to do in a space in which I have different people, different thoughts? A lot of times we talk about the benefit of diversity, but if you don't have inclusion with it, you don't actually get that benefit. You got a bunch of different people, but you still only have one thought and one voice actually impacting the decision.
And that one diversity sometimes has to conform to the majority opinion or be left on the outs.
And so you lose the benefit of diversity. You lose the talent, you lose the genius, the innovation that comes with diversity if you don't have a culture of inclusion in which you're willing to create space and you're creating tables where different people can give their ideas to try to produce the best possible answer for the circumstances that you're in. Go over to equality and equity. So a lot of people understand equality. Equality is about sameness. And equality is not a bad thing. It's something we should strive to. We want people to have the same opportunities, same shot at success or thriving.
Right.
But in order to get there, sometimes we have to recognize that people don't start off in the same place.
That's right.
And there are differences in our experiences.
Oh, yeah.
And so equity asks us to think about who are we talking about? What do they need in order to get to this point?
Right.
So if safety is the thing where everybody needs safety, we want everybody to have the same access to safety, but people might need different things to get there. So equity demands us ask, where are folks at? What do they need? What do they say they need? How can we think about our systems, our resources, in order to meet and support needs so that folks can get to that thing? And that may look different. And that is a discipline, that is a practice, that is something we have to build into our systems if we actually want to see this come to life.
We're going to pivot to discussing the Together We Heal campaign. Can you just enlighten us on what that is and how that's applied?
Yeah, absolutely. So Together We Heal is, in large parts, it's a multi-pronged strategy that my office has taken on in order to really think about equity, but also healing, and that really came up for us in the sometimes I call it the eye of the storm of the pandemic. So I had all these plans when I came in about, okay, I'm going to help train, we're going to set up some, strategies for departments to think about racial equity goals, all of this. And then the world changed on everybody. So all your plans, pretty reports, whatever you thought you was going to do, changed. I joke in city government, some people one day were working at, the aviation department, next thing they were delivering PPE, right? We all had to adjust, right? Because that's what the moment called for.
Right.
And so I started just doing the only thing that I knew, which was to start talking to people. What is your experience on the ground right now? What is happening? What are you seeing come out of the city? Is it working? Is it not? And so I started having these conversations with community members. And healing, this word just kept coming up over and over and over again. And it got me thinking about what is the city's role in healing. Yes, healing from the pandemic, but also healing from this massive racial reckoning that we were going through as both a city and a country. The conversation about certainly policing, but historical, structural racism was at the forefront. And so what does it look like to have that conversation, but also to reclaim this moment that we are in and say, what are we gonna do differently? And so Together We Heal was really birthed out of this belief that you can have those conversations, but I always say when I'm talking with community, at some point people are like, we need to stop having a conversation, we need to do some work. But the question is, what are we gonna do differently?
Right.
Something created the problems that we're talking about.
Yeah.
What? And what does that mean for how we need to be today?
Right.
And what we're going to do moving forward? And so Together We Heal is a way for us to think about this and to have these conversations. And so it starts off with a conversation, but it's meant to have that conversation actually support and lift up and create a space in order to reclaim our present and to reimagine our future to do different kinds of work. And so one of the tools we built in Together We Heal was something called Candid conversations. To me, it was really important that people had, everybody freaks out when you say, let's have a conversation about race. They're like, whoa, that's real deep. Yeah. I actually don't think it has to be that deep. I think we can have honest, real conversations about race. And so we designed this sort of strategy called Candid Conversations. And so if you both will humor me, I'd love to kind of have a candid conversation with you all from this Together We Heal.
Cool.
All right.
So here's how it works.
Okay.
We'll do a shortened version for time's sake, but I like to start off with a warm-up question,
Okay.
which is meant to, I just said we're going to have a conversation about race. People freaking out. They're like, this is going to be too deep. Let's just warm up with a nice, simple question. Then we're going to have a deeper question.
Okay.
And then we're going to cool off with something that is kind of takes us out of it. And the key is that we're going to put a question. I'm going to give you some choices.
Okay.
But we'll put the question out there, and all three of us got to answer it, okay?
All right.
All right.
All right. First one is, what is your favorite Chicago memory?
You go, Malcolm. When you're from Chicago, I'm going to have to think a minute.
Let's see. A lot of them. Whether it was going to the rink out south and going skating, or going to the beaches up north, or taking the train downtown to the Buckingham Fountain and enjoying that, or going to Lincoln Park Zoo, or going to the state of Chicago. It's so many good memories growing up. So a lot of things to pull from.
So I got to Chicago in April of 2020. So don't go to Vegas with me and bet no money, because you'd lose everything you had. And things were completely shut down, and they're just now opening. So I have it's a very low bar of a favorite memory right now. But I'm gonna start with, I brought my family, my wife, and my 15-year-old daughter with me.
Okay.
And so my favorite memory is getting her enrolled in school and seeing her smile for the first time since we got here, because it was a challenge where she couldn't make any friends, because we don't know anyone here, but she really liked the teachers, the principal, and the students she met. So that's when I knew we would be okay as a family here in Chicago. Is that the very welcoming, inviting environment at my 15-year-old daughter's school. Favorite memory.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
I feel like I'm the same. I have a ton of favorite memories. But one, so I love music, and I love live music in particular. And Chicago just has such a diverse sort of space when it comes to music. And what's nice is that sometimes you can kind of happen on really amazing talent that you didn't even expect. So I remember I was reading something, and there was something about it's called the I Fest. And I was like, what is this? And it was like Common is hosting it. I was like, this is amazing. And there's going to be all of these artists. And, it's one of those things where I was like, I've never been to it before. It's the first time he's doing it. And that year, it was like this perfect lineup. And they kept adding people. So I think it was Jay Electronica, MC Light was out there, Jennifer Hudson, Lupe Fiasco, and then the big surprise guest was Kanye West. And
wow.
Yeah. Cool.
I mean, when I say you just had like this beautiful day of so many great Chicago-born artists, and it was just a wonderful experience, right? Yeah. And what was nice is everybody out there was enjoying themselves. We people from all over the place, and the tickets didn't cost that much because it was the first time, and so there was this thought that this is never going to happen quite like this, because next year it's going to be double or triple, and it's going to be packed. But today this is really awesome. This is really dope, and this just feels like Chicago to me.
Oh yeah, that's a good memory.
Yeah.
Very good memory.
And so one of the reasons why I ask these warm-up questions and why I ask questions like that is because this is our city. It's a city we love. And so even in its hardest moments, it is the same city that produces these beautiful moments for us.
Right.
So let's get into a deeper question then. So, we're at the police department. The big sort of elephant in the room, right, is this conversation, this reality that we're having around policing, not just in this city, but as a whole country. A conversation that has got people feeling a lot of different ways, right? And so the question is, what are some of the biggest setbacks you feel the department has faced on its own journey toward equity? it's great to talk about the positive things, but sometimes, what are the challenges? What are some of the setbacks that you guys feel?
I'll take this one first,
Okay.
Malcolm. And it's a kind of a tale of kind of a recurring Groundhog Day type thing where a single officer can do something disrespectful in the community or something downright illegal. It's just totally not keep the oath they took to protect the city, and with a very broad stroke define the whole organization. And likely there are people who we never should have hired or who have lost their way. And they're nowhere near the majority of the organization, but their behavior cast us all in this very challenging negative light. It is the thing that's reoccurring, not just here in Chicago, but all across the country, that these moments of these officers who embarrass us as a profession, defining us all. And we have brave, courageous men and women who, like Malcolm, who do the job in the right ways day in and day out, and they just are stuck in this recurring scene of officers who, they define us all by the things that they do that none of us support, that none of us say that's a good officer. We all know what Chauvin did to George Floyd was horrible, tragic, illegal, criminal.
Yeah.
We all know it. No one in this profession defended that. But Derek Chauvin defined a whole profession by his conduct, with the backdrop of race being the real issue here, is that because of the dynamic of race and this wound that there just seems to not ever heal, and where everyone has a hard time discussing race, really is a microcosm of what's happening in policing. That the history of race and the history of policing is relived over and over with these single events. That's really the biggest frustration for me.
Well, for me, he actually took a part of my answer.
That's why I'm the suit now.
yeah, exactly.
I'm joking, man.
That's
I'm
it.
joking.
But it's public perception.
It is.
That is the huge thing, especially when you have a lot of officers, most officers, they're out there every day. They're walking in empathy and compassion when they go to jobs on patrol. Us in the 15th district, we're doing a DCO program. We're out there, we're making real connections, building real relationships with the community, the faith-based community, the business owners, the residents, and we're out there and we're doing all these great things. And like he said, if something happens and that thing overshadows all of the positivity and all the things that we're doing, and it puts us in a bad light. And so it's just one of those things that it's really frustrating. But we just continue to fight and continue to say, you know what, I'm still gonna go out here, I'm still gonna do the best job that I can, because at some point the positive is gonna have to overshadow the negative. And that's why I get out of bed every morning, because I believe that I took this job for the right reason, and I want people to see that there are a lot of good officers out here. We out here working hard, so at some point the positive is gonna have to overshadow the negative. So,
and can I double back on what Malcolm is saying? So if we make the argument as police officers that there are way more good cops than there are bad cops, the question then is from the public, well, why don't the good cops root out the bad cops? If these cops are good, and is the whole barrel bad, is the narrative to our sentiment that there are way more good cops than bad cops. And I would just argue the good cops are rooting out the bad cops, that the good cops are the example of the profession. And I would just say this one thing, because we still make the ultimate sacrifice. We still go down dark alleys. No one would go down to protect everyone in the community. We still confront people who are intent on hurting others with violence. No one else is going to do that. And those are the good cop examples of hopefully the profession as a whole, rather than the cops who don't do the job in the right way. And I would just say the biggest example of the good cop is the one who is killed in the line of duty, whose families would rather have them here instead of making that sacrifice, but yet they come to work and make that sacrifice every day as an example to people that this is the profession, not what that bad cop did, not what Derek Chauvin did, not what other cops do to embarrass us. It's that example of the ultimate sacrifice that should tip the scales on good cops versus bad cops.
I'll say for me personally, you're not doing nothing stupid around me.
That's right.
Like you're just not gonna be able to do it. And I know a lot of officers, we all feel the same way, all different races, because that should have never happened. So there are good cops out there, and we're out there and we're seeing all of this stuff, and it's just certain things you're not gonna do in front of me, period. You know, I'm gonna check you. Yeah. And I think that a lot of the perception is we just sitting around and we just allowing stuff to happen, and that's not the case. So I just wanted to say that.
What in government and policing, I think, in my role as a chief equity officer, I have to sit with this idea that, sometimes people come to me and they're like, you the chief equity officer, why isn't it fixed, right? What are you doing, right? What are you doing about policing?
That's right.
How are you trying to fix it? And the reality that I sort of sit with is that when I think about racism, and racism is a word that like freaks people out, and when I say racist, sometimes people think about it as an individual person or an individual event. Racism is a system.
That's right.
And it is a system that works sometimes with or without intention. Yeah. Good people can be a part of racist systems, systems that produce a racialized inequality, right? And so sometimes we get so focused on who did it, let's just go after that event, then talking about our collective responsibility, that even if I wasn't part of that, what is my role? What is my position? And just reminding and remembering. So sometimes I feel like the drawback is that how do you show up in those moments, right? How do you demonstrate that you are listening to people? How do you give people the space to say what they need to say? And sometimes it's not nice. I have been on the other side of plenty of conversations in which they are not nice. These are not cuddly conversations, right?
That's right.
But we need to talk about it, and I need to give space to it, even if I did or did not do the thing. But what I'm going to do is continue to show up and say, okay, let's talk about what we can do, what I can do. How can I help? How can I connect? How can I build? And so sometimes I feel like we lock up in those moments. We close our doors and say, we're going to just work on something behind here and then we'll release the thing. And so you are defined by how you show up in those moments, right? In so many ways. And so it's important. All right. So I told you that was going to be deep. So I'm going to close us out with a light question. And this is why we do it, right? That's processing a lot. And so we don't want to end on that.
That's right.
But we want to end on something that kind of brings us back and just kind of thinking. This is a question I love. So what song would you choose to be Chicago's anthem for this moment? So thinking about the joys. Actually, let me start. I'm going to go with Joy and Pain.
Frankie Beverly and Mays.
Yeah. That's a good one.
You're an old soul.
I am an old soul. So my song for Chicago in this moment is going to be Joy and Pain. Because I think our conversation actually just demonstrated there's beauty in the city. There are beautiful people, beautiful events, beautiful experiences we create every day, and there's also some pain, right? But that is ours. That is who we are, and that is what we live and experience day to day. But it is the collective, caring for our pain, learning from it to try to create more opportunities and days for joy that I think is how we gotta live here in this work.
Malcolm, I took the last one. You take it this one.
Let's go with Queen, We Are the Champions.
Yes.
Ah.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a song about resilience. It's a song about overcoming, and Chicagoans are very resilient and we're overcomers, and so that's why I picked that song.
So I'm gonna come back to the R&B genre and take Al Green, Let's Stay Together for 10.
Okay,
yes,
okay,
yes.
that's a good choice.
Because
Good choice.
as divided as we obviously are right now as a country, I think there's way more we have in common than what divides us. And so Let's Stay Together from Al Green is, in my opinion, right on point.
I love it.
That's a good one.
So we're gonna make a soundtrack. It was
Yeah, you
great.
go. Yeah.
Right.
Mixtape.
Yes, yes.
Right, right.
So thank you for doing Candid Conversations with me. I appreciate it, and,
Right.
and hopefully, more to come.
What can officers do daily, in your opinion, within the communities they serve to help foster equity and healing?
Officers can go out and be more empathetic and compassionate to what people may be going through. It's one thing to empathize with people. That's to kind of like meet people where they are. You may not exactly understand what a person's going through because you haven't gone through that, but you can still empathize with them. And then on top of that, you can be compassionate to people. And I think that's what people are really looking for. They're looking for officers who care, officers who demonstrate that they understand what they're going through. And if we just do that on a daily basis, we can not only just help change perception, but we can actually like build real relationships and start to heal, but it starts on every level of policing.
And so, Candace, what can a department do to help heal the inequality seen in the past and the present?
I think one important thing is create space for real honest conversations. We need to understand, yes, our communities, but we also need to understand one another across the aisle in the work that we do. We actually have to unlearn some things, right? We didn't, this system didn't happen overnight, right? And there were people who were doing their jobs who learned some things that contribute to inequity. And that takes a level of humility to realize and say, okay, what am I going to do different? And so I think when you're in conversation, when you're in relationship with community members, when you're in relationship with your fellow colleagues, right, you can have the kinds of conversations that I think support you in thinking about what must be different if I believe that there's an opportunity for something for change, right? And I think that's what is required for the transformation at its root.
Last question, Candace. What are we doing as a city to close the gap on inequity across all neighborhoods in Chicago?
We are putting race on the table. We are putting equity on the table. We are putting historical harm on the table, right? We are having real conversations about that, and we are asking ourselves what needs to be different. Now, that's messy, and we do not all agree about all of it, and so that is very clear, right? But hiding it, burying it under the table, saying like we can't have a conversation is not the way to go. So I think those are some key things that we're doing, coupled with putting resources to create opportunities for people to have what they need. Data that gives us an honest take on what's happening, not just an anecdotal take. And then making plans, saying what we're going to do different, and being committed and accountable to that change, and then transforming our relationships with community. There's been a lot of harm that's happened in this city. What is going to be fundamentally different about how we engage with one another that is going to actually fuel the change that we want to see? That's the work that we're trying to put on, and it's a daily practice. You're going to mess up,
Right.
That's okay. Just show back up the next day
That's
and try
right.
to do better.
That's right. And I'll close with the things the police department's doing. We're obviously on a consent decree, so we're taking it seriously. We're catching up on what was delayed or past due. We're moving forward at the momentum that we've never had in accomplishing not only compliance but also meeting deadlines, as well as using the floor of the consent decree and not making it the ceiling. We're doing above and beyond what the consent decree requires. We're pivoting to a community policing oriented police department. It's the best way to reduce crime is to prevent it from happening in the first place by interacting with the community, more community-led policing, more interactions with young people. So all of that to say we're on board with equity in this city. We're on board with changing the culture of the Chicago Police Department, not just through the consent decree that's ordered by a judge, but with the hearts and minds to change, which is really where you start. And with that, thank you all so much for joining us on Real Talk.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
And let's stay together.
Yes, yes.